Well, hello, James Freeman. How are you today? It's so great to talk to you.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's great to talk to you also. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Great. Great to hear that.
Well, I just wanted to get started. I'm very happy to chat with you about the work that you do and about the protocols and philosophy that you use to make some major changes in your life and help other people. Um, First, let's just talk a little bit about how you like a little bit about your story, who you are, and sort of how you came to understand or how you discovered the system that you're using.
Well, like a lot of people, I enjoyed my early childhood a fair amount. And as time went on, also like a lot of people, I found myself mm, maybe less satisfied over time as I began to learn more about the world. And I don't mean to say that the world is a bad place or less satisfying place once you're an adult, but there's more nuance and complexity than we're aware of when we're very young. You know, a very young child is very intuitive and naturally inspired as they go about their life. And um, when we learn about more complex things, we become a little bit more calculating and strategic, and that's really useful. That's really useful. But I found that when I was a young child, that being calculating, being strategic was so important, or I found it to be so important. I considered it very important. It was suggested to me that being calculating and strategic are very important. And I felt very challenged by that. So much so that the frustrations I had with that in my childhood and adolescence sort of bubbled up and boiled over once I reached early adulthood. And this led to a catastrophic meltdown, my whole life falling apart. Um, and it, in the midst of that, what what helped me to find some stable footing and relief and resolution is the things that I now talk about.
Wonderful. So let me see if let me clarify here a little bit. So you're saying that when you grew up as a young child, you realized that you had to be strategic in the world. Was that because the world was not um, like welcoming to you, or was that because the world was chaotic or like give me a little bit of clarity there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the world is not inherently demanding that we be strategic or calculating. These are modes of operating, ways of framing and approaching and relating to life that are very popular. And my parents and their parents certainly encouraged prioritization of these modes, but they're not the only ways of approaching things. And for me, being strategic and calculating are not naturally the dominant modes. So making them the dominant modes of approaching my life was not natural for me and not really aligned with the way that I prefer to operate. And so there was a tension, a strong tension and conflict between the way that I believed that I needed to operate and the way that I actually operate best.
Give me an example, just like, for the viewers, like what do you mean? Like, what's an example of being strategic and calculating? Like how does that, give me an example on how that would affect your life in a negative way.
Sure. And not necessarily negative, but less preferable, we'll say. Great example is food. Um, a calculating strategic way to approach one's relationship with food might be to do a lot of research, do a lot of experimentation and analysis and strategizing in order to formulate the most optimized diet that one can come up with. And there are other ways of approaching one's relationship with food, like a coherent relationship with the body, asking the body what's needed, feeling into what the body is saying that it needs. Very
Right.
different modes.
Yeah, that's a really good, amazing perspective. Like leading into like communicating with your body, asking questions, really asking your body what it needs, and what's serving your body. That's wonderful. So you went through childhood and you were in this process where you were taught to be calculating and strategic about everything in your life. And how did this learned process bring you to a space where you had a breakdown, or sometimes it's a breakthrough, but we feel like it's a breakdown. How did this way of going about life, being strategic about your food, your relationship with food, or the other things in your life, how did this lead to a major shift in breakdown in your life? Well, I guess a little bit more of a question here is, how did this negatively impact your life to where you felt like you really wanted to make a change?
Yeah, so this is the marker that I use to gauge whether a change is appropriate. Am I completely satisfied with my life? Because if the answer is no, then that merits some investigation, some clarification. And I started to ask myself this question when I looked around and found myself extremely miserable and not really understanding why, because I was doing the things that I had been taught were the right things to do. And I didn't feel satisfied with the results I was getting. Quite the opposite, actually. And that pain of knowing that having some sense of what I want and recognizing that I don't seem to be connected with that in my experience, that pain prompted me to investigate. Whereas before, when when the pain was more manageable, I didn't feel any compelling call to examine the way that I was operating. It was just the way that I had been taught. And I thought, oh, okay, well, This is what I was told to do. So if I do things this way, then I should be satisfied. But that wasn't the case. I saw people uh, operating that way and they seemed satisfied, but I didn't feel satisfied operating that way. And so that pain, in my view, is often a useful signal to prompt investigation. I think a lot of the time we misunderstand pain and we think that it means that there's something wrong. But in my experience, pain is a signal to prompt awareness in investigation. And that was what this was for me. Had been I had been thinking about things in certain ways and approaching my life in certain ways, working in certain ways, relating to people in certain ways that I had been told were the way that I should go about that. And yet I was in a lot of pain.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that you were able to stop and investigate, like look at the processes that you used and the things you learned and ask yourself, maybe this isn't the only way to go about my life, so at what point did it become at what point in your life did you realize this? And like, what was going on in your life that prompted you to make these dramatic changes?
Well, my child was on the approach. They were in the womb and their arrival was imminent. And I something was awakened in me during that time that hadn't been before. It's very easy to mm, ignore what is in front of us if it doesn't seem to be directly affecting somebody else. But with my child on the approach, I found myself called to assess where I was at, how I was doing things, because the pain had been there for a long time. But now that somebody else was going to be depending on me, I I sensed that I didn't have the capacity at that time to fulfill that role adequately. And so I had to check it out. I had to um, open the hood and see what was going on underneath. Whereas I didn't have any impetus to do that before.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, your child's coming into your life and it's so many changes are going on and it changes your role in life when you have a child. And um, that's like, such a great time to, take a look at the changes that the things in your life that you would like to bring about. Um, let me ask you this. What are some of the things that you like during this time? What are some of the things that you tried that didn't actually give you any results?
There were many. The most prominent one was drinking a lot of alcohol. because that seemed to help. And like many of the other things that I tried, it wasn't clear to me at the time that what I was doing wasn't actually resolving the root cause of the issue, but instead mm, alleviating the symptoms of it.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting how a lot of our some of our culture is rooted in that is just, numb the symptoms, with our medical system is treat the symptoms and don't get to the cause, don't dig deep into the root of, whatever's going on, but just numb it. And
Yeah,
so
don't worry about the root cause. Just keep treating the symptoms regardless of the cumulative effects. And it makes sense to me that someone who is solely interested in selling something might advocate for that kind of lens and approach. Um, I certainly wouldn't say that that's a good thing, but I can also understand where that kind of approach might come from. Um, but I certainly didn't find it useful. I feel a lot better when I investigate the root cause of something and actually resolve it so that there's no symptoms then to manage.
exactly, that makes a lot of sense. So, you have come to this point in your life where you felt the need for change. Your daughter's on the way. You've tried other things to sort of, um, you know, uh, that sort of helped temporarily with the pain and the suffering that you were going through, and they didn't work. Like, at what point? What was the point at which you found something that worked for you?
Well, it was a few years after that point. My child arrived in the world, and I still hadn't resolved the root cause of my struggles. And it took a total collapse, losing my home and my family. That was a catalyst for me to really look at what was going on. I had sort of scratched the surface, and this is where these strategies of symptom treatment came from, but actually addressing the root cause, you know, investigating deep enough to identify what was really at the heart of the issue. The catalyst for me was the immense pain and grief of losing my home and my family. And it doesn't have to be this way, but I find that it's a fairly common thing for people to put off investigating something deeply down to its root cause until there's a fucking emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that makes a lot of sense, and it's really like a point where you're really deeply seeking. So tell me about when you found the process that you use today and the process that you teach people and help people overcome, these times in their lives when they're really unhappy. Tell me about the process and how you came to it.
Well, I found bits and pieces over the years from my mid 20s until my early 30s. I'm 31 now. And so I was finding little concepts and reframes and tools that seem to help, sometimes a lot. Um, but it didn't, it wasn't cohesive. It was like I would do the thing, but the context in which I was introduced to it, there were components of that that didn't jive with me. And so I went through this process of um, researching a lot, uh, diving deep into a lot of different people's bodies of work and extracting gems, finding things that helped and discarding the rest. And over time, I found myself with this sort of chimera situation of uh, models and frameworks that I had learned from other people, tools and concepts, and um, sort of like glued them all together. And that was, um, it was, how do I put this? It was an ongoing project. And as that became more cohesive and refined in such a way where it was working for me and the first people that I began to coach in a formal capacity, that was when the prototype of this framework came about. And there was a linchpin moment a few years ago when I met my primary mentor, and they introduced me to this concept that was totally wild to me at the time, which is that what you want is really important. See, that was completely foreign to me. I had been through the labyrinth of um, the church of take a nap and manifest your dreams and various adjacent cultures. And it hadn't really landed for me that what what we authentically want is of the utmost importance. So I this was a huge shift for me. I had been very much immersed in optimizing strategies, but I wasn't really clear on the most important thing, which is what's actually important to me. And I don't think that this is something that one day you're going to sit down and think about it for an hour and then you're going to have the ultimate answer to what do I really want. Clarity about what you want and sustained, consistent focus on what you want is a skill to be developed and a practice to be repeated often, because your understanding about what you want, the the ways that you relate to that and organize around it are going to grow and evolve over time. Like when I ask myself, what do I really want? Um, when I first started asking myself that a few years ago, the answers that would come up, the language I would use to describe it, and the feelings and the images are very different than how they are now. And uh, I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make, coaches of various kinds and speakers of various kinds, I think, overlook this subtle nuance, which is that what you want is not some set in stone object that you're going to be able to point to and be like, this exactly, this specifically is what I want. There's more depth and nuance to it that is there's a process of exploration and discovery that's involved with developing that relationship with what you want. But that was really the big turning point for me was coming to recognize that, oh, my authentic desires are really, really important. There, I don't I don't think that there is anything else that actually matters. Everything revolves around that, really. You know, if you're satisfied with your life, in my view, it's almost certainly because you have some clarity, some reliable sense of what you want, and you're organized around that.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's great to find that like clarity about like that turning point where you find the um the framework starts to come together and the main focus is around what you want. And um so let's dive a little bit into like this process. So you mentioned that the main focus is discovering what you want or thinking about what you want or focusing on what you want.
Yeah, it's more of a practice than a destination.
Okay. So yeah, do you want to give me a little bit more information about the process that you use with people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, th- very broad strokes here because I could talk for days about the nuance and subtleties here, but really broad strokes, it's very simple. In order to notice what you want, to recognize it, you have to have some clarity about what it is. And it doesn't have to be some ultimate answer about what you want, because what you want varies by context and scope, right? Like
Hmm. Yeah.
your answer to what do I really want in a broad sense is not the same answer as what do I want, not necessarily the same answer as what do I want this week, or what do I want
Hmm.
today, or what do I want in this context with this person doing these things, whatever it is. You know, what we want, we have preferences and we have desires, and it's not just one ultimate thing that you can, put on a note card and be like, this is my true desire. I mean, it seems like possible, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, we have preferences that can be articulated in coherent ways across contexts. Um, and so that's the most important piece is in any given context, any given moment, in order for you to be aware of what you want, you have to have some clarity about what it is. Because it could be that right now, what you're experiencing is what you want. But if you didn't have clarity about what you want, then you wouldn't recognize it. So
Mm.
that's the fundamental component to a sense of fulfillment is to have some sense of some clarity about what you want. Otherwise, you're not going to notice it. It could be here and you wouldn't know unless you had that basic sense of it, some clarity about it. So that's the first piece. It's the most important piece. Everything else is supplementary to that because the other two pieces are attention hygiene and coherence in action. So attention hygiene is how focused and consistent is your attention on what you want.
Mm.
It's uh it's very common that someone might have some clarity about what they want, but they just don't give it much of their attention. And most often, this is because they're preoccupied with what they don't want. They might even be thinking, well, I'm thinking about what I want. What I want is for the thing that I don't want to go away. But what you want is independent of what you don't want, right? Like if what
Mm,
you don't want didn't exist, you would still want what you want. So
mm-hmm,
they're independent from each other. Um, so that's the second piece. Clarity about what you want, consistent focus on it, attention hygiene. And then the last piece is coherence in action, which if you have clarity about what you want and you're consistently giving it your attention, then coherence in action is going to flow naturally from that.
mm,
Because if you know what you want and you're giving it your consistent attention, you're going to take action.
mm-hmm,
And for clarity, giving your attention to something, thinking about something is an action. Now, there might be other actions that might be more supportive of what you want. But if you're giving your attention consistently to what you want, you're going to take action. You're going to do things that are supportive of what you want.
that's, oh, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And it's so simple, yet um, it seems like it's been a very like a very transformative practice. I guess people sometimes would say, "Oh yeah, I want to focus on what I want," but then they're afraid of they're like, okay, I want a home, but then they're afraid of, like, oh, well, I can't make money. I don't make enough money. And they focus on the financial aspects. And so how do you lead people out of this space of like feeling that they'll maybe never achieve what they want? Like, how do you lead someone from being in a rough situation, like let's just say like they want to buy a home and they don't have money to do that. They don't see where the money is going to come from. They don't understand how do you lead someone from that space of feeling really like desperate and struggling and focusing on the negatives? How do you lead them into this space of actually focusing on what they want?
Yeah, it's I think we've been sold this idea that if you just do this one simple thing, this one weird trick, uh, one time, then you're going to be able to just coast. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't, I have not found that to be the case. It seems to me as though creating something and sustaining it requires skill, and skill requires practice.
Mm.
So when it comes to these kinds of scenarios, what you were describing is extremely common where someone might have some sense of what they want, and yet they don't find themselves feeling readily able to give that their attention consistently. And the reason is because they're very practiced at focusing on what they don't want.
Mm.
And so it can take some time. I still do this, and I've been practicing this for years. I still catch myself focusing on what I don't want instead of what I do want. And this is why this is a practice. That happens a lot less in my life now, and increasingly less over time. But I spent over 20 years practicing focusing on what I don't want. It's going to take some time. So, some
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that I work with are older, decades they've been practicing focusing on what they don't want. And it's going to take some practice to instead establish a habit that seems almost like diametrically opposed to that. I mean, if
Mm.
you've been walking around on your hands for decades, then the learning to walk on your feet
Mhm.
might take a little while.
Yeah. So, so you help people with like practices, and you help them to be able to cultivate this within themselves, a practice of doing this continually. Um, what kind of changes have you seen in your life since you've been, practicing this?
So many, so many, but the ones that stand out the most are a frequent and often sustained sense of fulfillment and peace,
Hmm.
and satisfaction. Again, more frequent and sustained than I even thought was possible outside of the ever elusive level 27 enlightenment
Hmm.
and eternal bliss. It what I have experienced feels like a movement more in that sort of direction, in that what I feel I was promised when I was exploring those circles seems to be being yielded to me, um, but in a way that feels much more immediate and accessible. My awareness has grown and and continues to grow, and through that, I'm noticing more and more how much leverage and power we all have right now accessible to us. And all of the other benefits are supplementary to that. Like my health has improved, my vitality's improved, my finances have improved, my relationships have improved. But more importantly than that, and what has been the foundation for these other benefits, is that my awareness of the power and leverage I have in any given moment, and the accessibility of that power to create the experiences that I want. That's the real benefit.
That's beautiful. Gosh, thank you for explaining that. That sounds quite powerful, like a quite a powerful framework. Um, so
Before we move on, I think it would
yeah,
be a good time for us to take a brief break.
wonderful. Okay, let's take a break. Okay, so you just gave me this amazing testimony of this process that you have developed in part from gaining guidance from different spaces and working with your mentor, and it's changed your life. Amazing. Wow. I'm like very impressed in all the areas that it's completely dramatically shifted your life. Um, I have a question for you about this process. So when you were looking for different solutions for, the shift that you knew that you wanted to make in your life, um, like, what do you think with like how other self-help systems fail? Where do you think they fail? Um, that you weren't getting out of those systems that you really found life-changing about the system that you've developed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know that my ways of approaching things are objectively any better than anybody else's, but in my experience, the reason that these things have worked really well for me and the people I've worked with relative to the other things that I tried and they tried is a couple of things. The first one is too much complexity. I like things to be really simple. If something is too complex, I spent a lot of time learning really complex things that didn't end up giving me the results that I wanted and were logistically unmanageable for me, so not sustainable. That nowadays, if I encounter something and it's not like I don't really need the thing to happen right now and I have other options, if it's too complex, like I'm just not going to bother with it. I'm not even going to look into it. And I think a lot of other people are oriented that way too, because similar things. We got a lot of people who are offering all of these potential solutions to our problems, and a lot of us have tried a lot of things that took a lot of our time and energy, and they ultimately didn't work. And so I find that um, unnecessary complexity can greatly weaken the effectiveness of something. Um, and so I've really endeavored as I've put together my own cohesive frameworks for them to be simplified down to their bare essence, distilled, if you will. So the simplicity is really a differentiating factor. Like there's subtlety and nuance in application, but the structure of the thing itself is really, really simple. And that I think that's pretty clear based on the breakdown that I gave you before. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing is not enough, and this goes along with the complexity issue, is not enough emphasis or repetition of the most important things.
Mhm.
A lot of people, when they build these systems, they've been told by other people and Google and LLMs that uh, it needs to have all of these different components. You need to have all of these different pieces need to be there in order for it to be good. And maybe in some situations that's helpful, but even if you have a fair amount of different moving parts in a system, the most important parts are the most important parts. They deserve uh, the highest priority, the most focus, the most maintenance. Um, and so what I found when I began to work with my mentor and learn their system is that there was this theme of let's go over the fundamentals again and again and again and again in a bunch of different ways. Um, we can we can do other things, but those are supplementary to these dirt simple, essential, fundamental components. Like what I talked about, having clarity about what you want, giving it your attention, and taking actions. It doesn't
Mhm.
get any simpler than that.
Yeah.
Those are the fundamentals. Everything else is supplementary to that. And so I find a lot of people and I think maybe this is part of like the culture of content production is let me find other stuff to talk about.
Hmm.
So maybe that's part of where this comes from, but it's definitely something that attracts people to my work relative to others is that we focus a lot on the same things here
Hmm.
because they're the most important.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And keeping things simple. It's more likely someone's going to follow through if things are simple and it's like a simple
Yeah.
process or a simple practice. Because yeah, I agree with you. It seems like, you know, just social media has kind of changed things a bit to where everybody's, oh, look shiny here, do this, and it's just very overwhelming, and that can affect, the kind of results you get.
Right. If it's simpler, it's much easier to pick up and check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, what kind of people do you help? Like, what kind of people come to you with what kind of situations? Um, and like, how do you measure uh like progress?
Well, the measurement of progress in my view is, are you satisfied? Are you
Mhm.
satisfied with your experience? Broadly, maybe. Okay, but that's broad. That's going to take time probably for you to be completely satisfied with your whole life. But when we think we have a problem, the question is, are you satisfied in this context? And if you're not, let's do some work.
Okay.
If you are satisfied, great. We're done with that. Let's move on. And this is what I consider progress, is that uh, when someone is struggling, it's because they're not satisfied in some context. And for people who are really struggling a lot, it's usually not just one context. It's potentially many contexts in which they're not satisfied. So that's the signal we're looking for. Are you satisfied in this context? And if you're not, well, that's great. That's an entry point for us to do some work. If you're not satisfied, why specifically are you not satisfied? Now we've opened a door and we can walk in and explore.
That's wonderful. So, just the feeling of not being satisfied with an area of your life or your entire life, that is sort of the gateway. Those are the type of people that are where your coaching can help them. Um,
Yeah, because and a lot of coaches say this, that what I teach helps everybody, and that might be accurate, but the people that I think resonate most with my work and my unique um, voice is people who have done a lot of looking around and have found things that have given them partial results, but there's a backdrop of dissatisfaction.
that's great. So let's say someone is listening and they're very unsatisfied with their life or different areas of their lives, and they're depressed and anxious, and you know uh they love your story of completely changing all these areas in your life, and um uh, you've seen the results from this framework that you've used. What do you tell them now if they feel, let's just say they feel like completely uh, like hopeless? What would you tell them?
It's such a great question. The most important piece is clarity. So when I was hopeless and when I felt hopeless and anxious, I didn't have clarity about what I actually want. What I did have was a lot of clarity about what I don't want. And so if someone is feeling hopeless or anxious, then generally speaking, the most valuable thing to inquire about is, what do you want instead?
Hmm. And I know that you have a process in which to take people down this process because you've shared some of it with me, and I've seen you in action, and it's very impressive. Um, what is like one thing that like they could like do at home? Um, like let's say that somebody, as I mentioned, they're hopeless. They feel like maybe having clarity about anything is, they don't have it. Like, what would you recommend that they do to gain that clarity? What kind of process do you have, or do you have some sort of a guide or something that can show them how to get started?
Yeah, so I have a free protocol that I put together for this very purpose. It's called the Vital Catalyst, and it's one page, three questions. Takes about 10 minutes the first time that you fill it out. And then after you fill it out on an ongoing basis, you just look at it for like a minute a day. Um, the instructions are very simple. There's three questions to answer. Someone need only answer those questions sincerely to gain the clarity that they need to begin to facilitate immense positive change in their life. And I I I know the feeling very well that clarity about what I want doesn't feel even accessible to me right now. Even asking myself, what do I want? I know the feeling of asking that question and not uh, hearing the answer, um, because there's so much noise and pain. And so I find that it can be immensely helpful to change the scope a bit. So if if someone asks, what do I really want? And they don't seem to get a coherent answer, then it can be helpful to narrow the scope. So instead of just what do I really want in this broad sense, we can we can instead ask, what do I want to feel right now? Because
Mm,
to me, that scope puts the question and the answer in the immediacy of the present moment. It's not abstracted, right? And when we think about
hmm.
what do I really want in this broad sense, then we're thinking about it. Whereas
Mm,
what do I want to feel right now is something that we're asking of ourself right now. There doesn't have to be any thinking.
mm.
And really, generally speaking, like with inquiry like this for the purpose of gaining clarity, thinking is not necessarily conducive because you're not trying to construct something or analyze something. You're checking in with yourself for what's already there.
That's great. That's wonderful. It's been a great, it's been very enlightening speaking with you today. Um, so where can people find out more about this? this framework and, where can they get more information and learn about how to do this? You mentioned that you have a free, like a way to get started that's completely free. Um, where
Mhm.
else can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube and Instagram and even TikTok. Um,
Wonderful.
and I I can provide links as well that can be included in the show notes, but the name of the channel on each of those platforms is The Vital Aesthetic.
Okay. And can people just reach out to you and ask you questions and get your take on it? Or you
Absolutely.
have,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have a Telegram channel that people can join and I can hand over the link for that as well.
Okay, great. Or they can DM you at any of those platforms and get some information
Yeah,
from you.
Instagram and TikTok does DMs. YouTube is kind of implementing that feature, but I don't think it's totally live yet. But Instagram and TikTok, people can DM me there. And um, if someone joins my Telegram group, I can DM them at their request.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this very enlightening podcast. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you and to get more of a deeper understanding of this amazing and transformative system that you've developed. And I just wanted to thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for talking with me. It's been a great pleasure.
All right. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Alrighty, take care.
Bye.
Bye.